If you've ever wondered exactly how Social Security decides the dollar amount on your monthly check, I want to walk you through the real formula today, because almost nobody actually sees this explained in plain language. Your benefit isn't a percentage of your final salary, and it isn't money sitting in a personal account with your name on it that you're simply withdrawing. It's the output of a specific, three-step calculation built around your highest 35 years of earnings. And understanding that calculation reveals a few things that genuinely surprise people, including one detail that can quietly shrink your benefit without you ever realizing why. I think this is worth understanding, even if you're already retired and have been collecting benefits for years, not just for people still planning ahead. Knowing exactly how your own number was built makes it possible to actually check that number for accuracy, rather than simply trusting that whatever figure showed up on your statement must be correct. Errors in earnings records happen more often than most people assume, and the only way to catch one is to understand what the underlying calculation is actually supposed to look like. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how this works, step by step, with real numbers. So by the end, you'll understand not just what your benefit is, but why it's that specific amount. If you're not subscribed yet, take a moment and do that now, and turn on the bell. Understanding the actual mechanics behind your benefit is one of the most useful things you can know, and it rarely gets explained outside of dense government publications. That's what this channel is for. Subscribe, and let's get into it. Let's start with step 1, which produces a number called your average indexed monthly earnings, usually shortened to AE. Social Security looks at your entire earnings history and pulls out your highest 35 years, meaning the 35 years in which you earned the most, not necessarily your most recent 35 years. If you worked for 45 years, the system simply ignores your 10 lowest earning years and uses the best 35. Before those 35 years get averaged together, each year's earnings get adjusted for something called indexing. Here's why that matters. A dollar you earned in 1985 doesn't represent the same purchasing power as a dollar earned today, so Social Security adjusts each year's earnings upward based on how average wages across the entire country have grown since that year, up through the year you turn 60. This indexing makes sure an early career year and a recent year can be fairly compared and averaged together on equal footing, rather than treating an old dollar the same as a current one. One detail worth knowing: any earnings from the year you turn 60 onward are not indexed at all. They're used at their actual face value. Once all 35 years are indexed, they get added together and divided by 420, which is simply the number of months in 35 years. That gives you your AIME, a single monthly figure representing your lifetime earnings, adjusted fairly across time. Now here's the detail I mentioned earlier that catches a lot of people off guard. What happens if you didn't work a full 35 years? Social Security still divides by 420 months no matter what. If you only have 30 years of actual earnings, the remaining 5 years get counted as $0 in the average. Those zeros get averaged in right alongside your real earning years, which pulls your AIME down, sometimes significantly. Let me show you what that actually looks like with a number. Say someone has 5 years counted as 0 because they only worked 30 years total. Adding just one additional year of solid earnings, say $50,000, eliminates one of those 0 years from the calculation and can raise their AIME by roughly $100 or more a month. That increase in AIME then flows into the next part of the formula and produces a real, permanent increase in their monthly benefit, often somewhere in the range of an extra $30 to $40 a month for the rest of their life, just from replacing a single 0 year with a real one. So that's step 1. Now let's move to step 2, which takes your IME and converts it into what's called your primary insurance amount, or PIA. This is the benefit amount you'd receive if you claimed exactly at your full retirement age, before any adjustment for claiming early or late. This conversion uses a formula built around $2 thresholds called bend points and 3 fixed percentages, 90%, 32%, and 15%. For anyone first eligible for benefits in 2026, meaning anyone turning 62 this year, the bend points are $1,286 and $7,749. Here's how they're used. The first $1,286 of your AIME gets multiplied by 90%. The portion of your AIME between $1,286 and $7,749 gets multiplied by 32%, and any amount of your AIME above $7,749 gets multiplied by just 15%. Add all three pieces together, and that total is your PIA. Let me walk through a real example. Say your IM comes out to $5,000 a month. The first $1,286 gets multiplied by 90%, which equals $1,157.40. The remaining $3,714, the amount between $1,286 and $5,000, gets multiplied by 32%, which equals $1,188.48. Since this person's AIME doesn't reach the second bend point of $7,749, there's nothing to calculate in that third tier. Adding the two pieces together gives a PIA of $2,345.88, which gets rounded down slightly to $2,345.80. Now let's look at what happens for a higher earner, someone whose AIME reaches all the way into that third tier. So you can see the full formula in action. Say this person's AIME is $10,000 a month. The first $1,286 still gets multiplied by 90%, the same $1,157.40 as before. The portion between $1,286 and $7,749, which comes to $6,463, gets multiplied by 32%, equaling $2,068.16. And the remaining amount above $7,749, which is $2,251, gets multiplied by just 15%, equaling $337.65. Adding all three pieces together gives a PIA of $3,563.21, rounded down to $3,563.20. Compare the two examples for a moment. The person with an AIME of $5,000 ended up with a PIA of about $2,346, meaning roughly 47% of their AIME got replaced by their benefit. The person with an AIME of $10,000, twice as much income, ended up with a PIA of about $3,563, only about 36% of their AIME. Double the earnings produced nowhere close to double the benefit, which is exactly the progressive design at work. I want you to notice something important in that math, because it explains why this formula is described as progressive. Look at how much of this person's AIME got converted into benefit at each tier. 90% of the first chunk, but only 32% of everything above that. If someone earned enough to reach that third tier above $7,749, that portion only converts at 15%. This means lower earners get a much higher percentage of their pre-retirement earnings replaced by Social Security, sometimes over 80% for very low lifetime earners, while higher earners typically see less than 40% of their earnings replaced. This isn't an accident or a flaw. It's a deliberate design choice, meant to provide proportionally stronger support for people who earned less throughout their working years. Here's a detail that surprises a lot of people who assume claiming later changes this formula. Your bend points, the $2 thresholds I just described, get locked in based on the year you turn 62, regardless of when you actually decide to claim your benefit. If you turn 62 this year, but wait until 70 to actually file, you're still using this year's bend points, not whatever bend points exist 8 years from now. Delaying your claim doesn't change your PIA calculation itself. It applies a separate additional adjustment on top of your PIA, increasing your monthly payment through delayed retirement credits, which is a completely different mechanism from the bend point formula. There's also a cap built into this entire system that's worth understanding. Only earnings up to what's called the taxable maximum count toward your benefit calculation in any given year. For 2026, that taxable maximum is $184,500. If you earned more than that in a particular year, the excess simply doesn't count, either for the payroll taxes you owe or for your benefit calculation. This effectively caps how high any single year's earnings can push your AIME, and by extension, caps the maximum possible benefit anyone can receive, no matter how high their actual income was in a given year. One more piece worth knowing about, because it often gets confused with delayed retirement credits. Once you turn 62, your PIA actually starts receiving annual cost of living adjustments, the same COLA increases I've covered in other videos on this channel, even if you haven't claimed your benefit yet. This is separate and distinct from the delayed retirement credit, which only kicks in if you wait past your full retirement age. Between 62 and your full retirement age, your PIA is quietly growing with COLAs in the background, regardless of whether you've actually started collecting anything yet. Let me answer a few more questions about how this formula applies in specific situations. Does this same calculation apply to spousal and survivor benefits? Indirectly, yes. A spousal benefit is generally based on a percentage of the working spouse's own PIA, calculated using their earnings record through exactly this same process. A survivor benefit works similarly, generally based on what the deceased spouse's PIA was or would have been, again calculated through this same AIME and bend point process. The formula itself doesn't change. What changes is whose earnings record it gets applied to, and what percentage of that resulting PIA you're entitled to receive. What about self-employment income? Self-employment earnings count toward your AIME the same way wage income does, as long as you paid Social Security taxes on it, which self-employed individuals do through a slightly different mechanism than employees, but with the same underlying contribution to your earnings record. The same 35-year indexed average applies regardless of whether your income came from an employer or your own business. And what if you have a gap in your earnings record where you genuinely believe a year is missing or incorrect, perhaps due to an employer error decades ago? This is worth addressing directly with Social Security, since correcting even one inaccurate year, especially one that's currently counted as a low number or a zero, can have a real, permanent effect on your AIME and therefore your PIA going forward. So here's what I want you to actually do with this information. First, log into your My Social Security account at ssa.gov and review your actual earnings history, year by year. Confirm that every year you genuinely worked shows the correct earnings, since errors in this record directly distort your AIME calculation, sometimes permanently lowering your benefit if they're never corrected. Second, if you have fewer than 35 years of recorded earnings and you're still in a position to work additional years, even part-time, understand that each additional working year directly replaces one of those $0 years in your calculation, which can produce a real, permanent increase in your eventual benefit. Third, use the benefit estimate tool within your My Social Security account, which calculates your actual AIME and PIA using your real earnings record, rather than trying to do this math by hand. This gives you a personalized number rather than a generic estimate. Fourth, remember that your bend points are locked in the year you turn 62, but your benefit can still grow after that point in two completely separate ways. COLA increases applied directly to your PIA, and delayed retirement credits if you wait past your full retirement age to actually claim. Here's the honest, full picture one more time. Your Social Security benefit comes from a two-step calculation. First, your highest 35 years of earnings get indexed for wage growth and averaged into a monthly figure called your AME, with any years short of 35 counted as zero. Second, that AME runs through a progressive formula using bend points, currently $1,286 and $7,749 for 2026, converting it into your PIA, the benefit you'd receive at full retirement age. Lower earners get a higher percentage of their earnings replaced than higher earners by deliberate design, and your bend points lock in the year you turn 62. even if you delay claiming for years afterward. If you know someone who's never actually understood where their Social Security number comes from, send them this video. Knowing the real mechanics behind your check turns a number you simply accept into one you can actually verify, and in some cases, improve. That's what this channel is here for. I'll see you in the next one.